Welcome to this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive for the fourth week in June 2024. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Jamie's out today. In a few minutes, we'll hear about Tesla's recent shareholders' votes, which include approval of CEO Elon Musk's massive compensation package. That's coming up later in the show, but first, the news this past week was dominated by cyber attacks against CDK Global, which resulted in the shutdown of its dealership management system. That means thousands of dealership locations across the country are scrambling to keep business running, going into what's expected to be a big sales weekend. Some are using old-fashioned pen and paper to get sales done, or at least move the process close to the finish line. Automotive News senior retail editor Dan Shine and retail tech reporter Mark Hollmer are leading coverage of the story here at Automotive News. They talked Friday afternoon about everything we knew at that point about the story and how it's affecting dealers.
Mark Hollmer, thanks for joining us today on Daily Drive.
Glad to be here.
Retail technology reporter here at Automotive News. I don't know what we're going to talk about today. I don't know how we're going to fill 5 or 7 minutes. Is there anything going on in the world? Oh, wait a minute. There's a bomb that went off in automotive retail this week with the cyber attack on CDK Global, the leader in dealer management systems or DMS space. First, I guess give the listeners a quick little lesson on what a DMS is and how vital it is to dealership operations.
Well, a DMS is a dealership management system, which is a fancy way of saying it's a software platform that helps dealerships run different aspects of their business, from collecting sales leads to doing customer connections to F&I and all kinds of other things.
So safe to say, if one of our listeners, you or I, go into a franchised auto dealership, we're checking us in for a service appointment, we're going to look at a used car, we want to buy a new car, some kind of DMS integration is there.
At every dealership at this point, there's likely some version of a DMS, and they're designed to boost efficiency, to help aid productivity. So dealers can do all kinds of things and make their job smoother so they can work with more customers and sell more cars.
So CDK in the news this week for, I'm sure they don't want to be in the news this week for this, but how big a player are they in the DMS space?
Well, the cyber attack was even more that they suffered. They suffered actually two on both on June 19th, one in the wee early hours and one late in the day, so that it was actually reported to dealers early on the next day on the 20th. But it's partly such a big deal because they're the dominant player in the DMS space by a large margin. They have roughly 15,000 dealerships, and when you factor in trucks through North America, that number goes up to 30,000, and that's a lot of dealerships, and that's a lot of car sales that could be impacted.
And they also are the preferred DMS provider for 5 of the 6 largest public dealership groups.
That's correct. They're they matter. They're the company that everyone else wants to knock out of number one.
Yep. So there's never a good time for a cyber attack, but dealers right now, this time of year for dealers, it's not great timing for them. How come?
It's because this is summertime, and summertime is the prime season for dealerships to sell cars. I believe that sales tend to be the biggest at this time of year, or among the biggest. And so if you have something that knocks out the system that helps you run your operations, then and then it happens in summertime, that's just poorly timed and really not good.
And also, I think, in talking with, hearing a lot of colleagues here at Automotive News talk, and then the second half of each month is kind of also an important time for, a lot of the sales at dealerships take place in the second half of the month. People kind of wait and hold off, and then end of the month comes, dealerships want to make their numbers, and so they're more apt to bargain on things. So kind of a double whammy for dealers.
It is, and that's why the biggest key part of this is going to be CDK's recovery. Estimates vary as to how long it takes for a company to recover from a cyber attack. One estimate, if it was a ransomware attack, for example, it could take on average 24 days. And that's way too much time for dealerships to not be able to use their full systems.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of uncertainty.
And what are some kind of the serious implications for CDK? I mean, from a business standpoint, from a legal standpoint.
Well, first off, well, primarily, I guess it would be the risk of lawsuits. This we don't know what specific kind of attack this was, but it appears to be some kind of denial of service or ransomware attack that ended up denying service. So depending on how severely dealerships are impacted, how much money they lose from not selling cars or doing service appointments and, things that their systems help them govern, then they could end up suing. Many of them could end up suing. On the flip side, as more and more customers learn about this attack, they're going to realize that their data is potentially at risk or in jeopardy. We don't know yet if there was any data taken, but certainly there's a risk there, and that creates liability on the customer side. So the big thing here is lawsuits, lawsuits, lawsuits. Another factor is perception of the auto industry. Customers already have issues with dealerships and their buying experience, and while many are happy, there's large numbers that still find the experience to be less than ideal. And this is one more nail in the coffin, so to speak, about negative perceptions.
And there's also, the FTC has been very active in instituting something called the safeguards rule, which is, trying to, beef up these, kind of security to keep consumer data protected. A lot of dealerships aren't big fans of this just because it adds layers and it, adds to their workflow, I think, a little bit, and can slow down the sales process and the paperwork and all that. But talk a little bit about safeguards rule and how this kind of plays into it.
Well, basically, the safeguards rule is a federal regulation that governs, without going into all the details, it governs how dealerships handle and protect customer data. What safeguards are in place to protect it from cyber attack? How do they store it? How do they share it? And it covers all of the steps into how you acquire, house, and protect data. And part of the thing that dealers have to do is they have to comply with all of the protection requirements, and that means having software in place. It means maybe having an IT person, or checking a number of boxes that basically involve beefing up your cybersecurity protections. And this could bring the FTC into play, and they could start an inquiry. What did CDK do to enable that, for one thing, or where did they fall short? If dealerships are relying on that for part of this, but then dealerships themselves could be taken to task as well.
And dealers are, if they're one thing, they're adaptable, they're innovative, they're creative. When we were hit with the COVID, pandemic, they had some of their best years in a long time, just because they kind of found workarounds and they continue to sell cars, they continue to service cars. How are kind of dealers who are CDK customers kind of working around this shutdown of some of the key components they need?
Well, it's remarkable to me because rather than panic and freak out, more than the initial shock of it, it seems to be a number of our reporters, as you know, were working on this, basically found out that they did workaround. They did really simple and effective workarounds, such as the most basic thing in the world, using pen and paper. And pen and paper cannot be hacked. Pen and paper cannot be stolen. It cannot be taken hostage and for ransom money. It's cumbersome. It takes a while, but it gets the job done. And in the short term, they still have pen and paper.
Yep. And they'll have to, at some point when this is all up and running again, we'll have to input all those repair orders, all those vehicle sales into the system. But for now, it's effective for them.
That's true. Once this is resolved, the CDK customers are going to have a lot of extra work to catch up on all of this, and that's perhaps another issue. But moving ahead, it's another reminder that dealers and dealerships can get the job done under all kinds of adversity, and that's an important thing to realize too.
And finally, kind of more on a sobering note, this is not new. Cyber attacks have been going on for quite a while, whether it's universities, health systems, insurance companies, everybody's, a potential victim. Is this kind of, a new normal for auto dealerships that and auto dealerships, the industry itself, automakers, that they're going to have to maybe plan and prepare for something like this happening to them?
I spoke to some technology experts who focus on data privacy and the safeguards rule. I spoke to, at least one dealership guy who's involved in technology, and some people see this as the new normal, that the attacks are going to get more dramatic and worse, and that this is just a reminder here that despite the cost and the inconvenience of getting set up, cyber protections to minimize the risk, not eliminate it because that's impossible, is probably a better investment. Other people see that it isn't that it's the new normal, but this is the old normal. This has been this way for some time now. It's just that we're starting to increasingly notice as these attacks come closer to us.
Mark, great information, great work this week by you, by the retail team and Automotive News, everyone all the staff at Automotive News, really keeping everybody informed. Great work, and thanks for your time.
Sure, likewise.
You can find much more about this ongoing story at autonews.com, where we'll be updating information throughout the weekend. Coming up, Tesla shareholders recently approved CEO Elon Musk's $56 billion pay package. But that's not the only big move shareholders voted on. Our own Laurence Iliff joins us to talk about everything Tesla. That's next on Weekend Drive. Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Tesla CEO Elon Musk recently won his $56 billion pay package with 77% of shareholders voting in favor. In the run-up to the June 13th shareholder meeting, Wall Street analysts had mostly expected a positive vote on the compensation, but some were worried that a negative vote could push Musk to focus on outside projects. It's also not the only big move shareholders approved. Jamie recently spoke with Automotive News staff reporter.
You've been busy this past week, as you so often are. You covered the not entirely unexpected Fisker bankruptcy, but you also had to keep an eye on Tesla's shareholder meeting, where investors overwhelmingly voted to reinstate CEO Elon Musk's massive package of stock options worth an estimated $56 billion. Because they're options, their actual value will vary with Tesla's stock price. What do we know about how these payouts work?
Yeah, so basically, he gets the right to buy millions and millions of shares at a certain price that was set, back in 2018, right? So he has to, exercise the options, and then he has to wait 5 years before actually selling the stock. And so, the original package was quoted like 56 billion. So that's kind of what we've all been using. Some other news organizations say like 46 billion. Basically, if you look at it in terms of stock, his ownership in Tesla went from about 12 to 13% of all of Tesla, and now it's at like 21% of all of Tesla.
Wow.
Right? So he says, I don't need the money, I'm rich, right? He says, I need a large enough chunk of Tesla so that I don't lose control of the company, or so that I have enough influence and power to steer the direction of the company as we move into artificial intelligence, as we move into these other things. He thinks he's the best steward for that, right? And so, he had to sell some Tesla stock to buy Twitter,
Yeah,
So
he
I
sure
think
did.
maybe he was feeling like he was getting a little diluted,
Hmm.
diluted,
Right.
and
Not diluted. He never thinks
right,
that, but others think that about him
diluted
sometimes.
in terms of stock. And so I think maybe, money's nice, right? But I think that's one thing he really wanted. He said he wants to get to 25%. So there could be another pay package, right? This old pay package was from 2018 to the present. He had to meet so many goals. He met them early. It
Yeah.
was a 10-year plan. He met them early. He met them all. They were outrageous goals. I mean,
They seemed impossible.
there's an argument to be made that, you create a $500 billion company. So maybe you do get $50 billion, right? If nobody else could have done it, if it would have gone bankrupt without you, and again, it's stock, it's stock options, it's a chunk of the company that you're getting. And that's the way startups are structured, right?
Mhm.
Look at Google and Facebook and all these things. These guys are outrageously rich because of their stock options. And that's the way Tesla was structured.
Yeah, a classic Silicon Valley thing. He doesn't take any cash pay, but he gets paid in stock or stock options that can leverage up into a huge payoff, as he's getting now. I guess there's still some chance the courts will intervene again, but
Yeah, it's
for now,
possible.
he's
Yeah.
he's set up for that. But there were some other interesting things that came out, including some as he always loves to tell us how the stock is going to go up. He has some ideas about. You mentioned AI, but in particular, robot cars that can serve as taxis, and also robot personal assistants.
Yeah.
Sees a lot of potential in those.
It was actually fun to watch this event because we knew before the event started that he had won the vote on the stock package. He actually announced it, kind of the that it was going to happen the night before, and he was in a really good mood, and he was like, the future is going to be so crazy. So they used to talk about making 20 million cars a year. That was the goal, and they were going to grow to that. Well, they don't talk about that anymore. Sales are flat, right? And they're going to be probably flat this year. So he started talking about how they're going to have robot taxis, and they're going to have a massive robot taxi network. Tesla's going to make its own robot taxi, which we might see on August 8th at an event. And then Tesla owners, there's 6 million Tesla cars. There'll be 7 million by the end of this year on the road. They will be able to give their cars over to the Tesla fleet for use a day, a week, a month, and then they will get a cut of the profits. And he says this will 10x the value of Tesla, right? So from 580 billion to 5 to 7 trillion, right? And he cites a study by a very pro Tesla investment firm, ARK Invest, that says this is going to happen in 5 years, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And then but the next stage, and he even said, if you think that's crazy, this is crazier. Hold on. And they have this Optimus robot, and kind of the robot is an extension of the car in a way, right? Because it's using autonomous software and it's using artificial intelligence to be able to map itself onto reality and to make decisions just like your robot car is supposed to, right? With AI, it's not just supposed to follow rules that you programmed into it. It's supposed to kind of make decisions, right? And so you'd have this robot that's now kind of the car in a way, with the full self-driving software, and they're building it up from scratch. They're building their own actuators and motors. They're building their own supply chain. And Elon Musk thinks that he didn't give a time period, but he has a couple robots working in Fremont now, he said, and then they'll have more thousands in factories next year. And then at some point, they'll kind of roll them out to businesses and then to the public. But the punchline here is that there'll be, 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion humanoid robots. Everyone will have them. They'll be working in factories. They'll be babysitting your children. They'll be teaching your kids. And it's interesting. He says that there's going to be other players in this market, right? And there are other players. There's startups, there's
Yeah.
Boston Dynamics,
Yeah.
et cetera. He said, even if we only have 10% of the market, we'll be making 100 million robots a year. They'll cost us 10,000. We'll sell them for 20,000. That's $1 trillion in profit a year. Now, I mean, this is
Back of the
some
envelope math for sure.
this is some wild, crazy stuff. And a lot of people say don't bet on Elon, but in terms of building cars and everything, yes, he delivered, absolutely. But in terms of like his kind of more pie in the sky things about autonomous vehicles and stuff, I mean, he was talking about that 10 years ago, that Tesla was going to drive by itself from LA to New York. And if you look at the videos of people using the full self-driving software, some of these people can't get down the street, or sometimes they can go 10 or 15 minutes, but then they have to intervene. But that's not an autonomous car. Waymo and Cruise, whenever they come back, they have to go tens of thousands of hours without having to intervene on their vehicles, or they'd be stuck all the time.
Yeah. No, very interesting math. We'll talk more about the robot personal assistants maybe another day. I want to make sure we get to something of more immediate interest for Tesla consumers and investors, which is the Cybertruck. It seems like production is starting to ramp up a bit.
Yeah, at the shareholders meeting June 13th, he said that Cybertruck production had hit 1,300 a week, right? And so that is going to be a big number going forward. Tesla is probably the number one, electric. The Cybertruck is probably number one electric vehicle right now over the Ford Lightning. But
number one pickup, EV pickup.
EV pickup.
Model Y's number one total.
Yeah, sorry, EV pickup. But that's a big number, and what that tells me is that they are going to sell, a lot of these based on their backlog this year. And he also said something that was also interesting, that they were going to stop, or that they were going to start making the cheaper trucks, right, next quarter. So they've only been making the Foundation series, which is 100,000 to 120,000. And a lot of people are waiting for the next one, right, which is less expensive, 80,000. And then later on, they get to the 60,000. But there's a lot of happy Tesla fans out there. And it's also, it's going to be interesting for, Rivian. Maybe not so much the Ford F-150 Lightning. That's probably a different customer. But definitely for Rivian, there's going to be a lot of competition in that space.
Yeah, very interesting truck battle heating up, and it's the only new model that Tesla has. So that's their growth engine, or the thing to counter the declining sales of the existing models. So a really important vehicle. Absolutely.
And even though they're probably not going to make like a lot of money on it at first, because they have all those sunken costs, etc. But it's a really I think it's a vote of confidence that they're making a lot, they're selling a lot. There's still a lot of interest in the vehicle because it is very weird. It's quite expensive. It's quite weird, and at some point that's going to taper out. But it's very important for Tesla and its profit that it takes years for before the Cybertruck starts to plateau, because it was an expensive vehicle to make.
Before I let you go, I want to hear a little bit about Elon Musk's conversations with former President Trump, who Trump has not really been a cheerleader for EVs by any stretch, but Elon says maybe he's coming around.
Yeah, the question from a Tesla shareholder was that he's been hearing in the last couple of weeks that, Trump has been saying a little more positive things about electric vehicles, saying that he likes Elon, electric vehicles are fine, but that everybody should have a choice. They shouldn't be forced to buy electric vehicles. That's a change in his tone. Before it was kind of much more dismissive, like, I'm going to get rid of all the subsidies and EVs. You can't even drive down the street. You have to keep charging them, right? But Elon really perked up when he said, "Oh yeah, Donald Trump calls me out of the blue. I don't know why he calls me. He's very nice to me. I tell him that EVs are good for the future. That EVs are American. Tesla's an American brand. A lot of the EV makers are American." Um, and that maybe Donald Trump is starting to come around based on Elon talking to him, but also Elon said that a lot of Donald Trump's friends are starting to buy Teslas, and he may be hearing positive feedback there. So I thought it was a cute anecdote.
Interesting times. More interesting news to come from Tesla for sure. We know you'll stay all over it. Lonnie, thanks so much for joining me today, and welcome again to Weekend Drive. You've been with the Daily Show, the Daily Drive, so many times. It's great to have you on the weekend.
It was great to be here.
That's all for this Weekend Drive edition of Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on Tesla, the cyber attack against CDK Global, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. If you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.